This is The Inner Page, a program designed to bring you the information you once found on the inner pages of your daily newspapers. We will have conversations with the local service providers, business owners, elected officials, community leaders, and our neighbors who will share information about the events and needed services they provide to our communities that make our lives better each day. This is today's edition of The Inner Page. I am your host, Alan Wagner. Joining me today is my co-host, Susan Blake. We have a team in here today, and Jamil, I'm going to let you go on here first and introduce the members of your team.
Good morning. I'm Jamil Bey, the director of the Urban Kind Institute, and our project that we're here to talk today about is Pittsburgh Study. Before we get too deep into that, let me just let you know who's here with me. There's Dr. Mary Omer from the University of Pittsburgh and Ms. Teresa Jenks.
Okay.
Yes.
The question, roles introduction. I'm excited to learn more about the Pittsburgh Study and the ReCAST work that's been happening around the region. Before we dive into our discussion today, would you take a few minutes to introduce yourselves and tell our listeners a little bit about the role you play in the study?
Hi, this is Mary Omer. I am with the School of Social Work. I'm an associate professor there, and I've been involved with the School of Social Work for a very long time. I got my master's there, went and worked as a community organizer for about 15 years, got a PhD there. I went away to Georgia and taught in Georgia and at the Georgia State University, and came back in 2014. And I chair what's called the Community Organization and Social Action Specialization in the MSW program. And I'm the co-principal investigator on the project that we're going to be talking about today.
It's interesting because we have, four PhDs, including myself. We all did the same thing at the University of Pittsburgh. And once you get there, they put their hooks into you, and I ended up an adjunct professor there also. All right, our next guest.
I am a Penn Stater, by the way.
Jamil's Penn State.
There
so,
you
there's a little rivalry there.
Excuse you, sir.
Rivalry.
Teresa.
One more.
Yeah, Teresa.
Okay.
Yeah. She is a citizen scientist. I have never heard that, and I find that fascinating. So I'd like you to explain what that is, exactly what kind of projects you do. I've never really heard of a citizen. That's probably what I should call myself, because I investigate everything, and I'm into all the, science things. That's why we clicked. Yep. I want to know everything about anything that's of importance, of course, and that sounds really, really cool. So would you please give us some insight on who you are and what you do?
So my name is Teresa Jenks. I live in the West End area of the city of Pittsburgh. I'm a Pittsburgh resident, and I am citizen science. Wow.
Yeah.
That is a very busy title. But really, it's me being involved in the community and wanting programs to exist and thrive throughout my community. And I say my community, I don't just mean the area where I live. I mean the whole city of Pittsburgh and beyond. My community means our community, all of us together. No, I didn't graduate from Pitt. I didn't become it.
Me either.
Or Penn State.
We're outnumbered.
We're totally outnumbered. Or Penn State and get a PhD and come back and become a facilitator. But I have facilitated, spoken to classroom of students and tell them the importance of community involvement. I have been involved with them since 2014, Pittsburgh Study. With Dr. Omer now, with the ReCAST project and the Matrix. What is the Matrix? It sounds like a dance or some kind
Sounds like a movie.
Some kind of movement you're doing. It is a movement. It's a movement of community building and trying to find out what the community really needs.
And our community really is Allegheny County.
Yeah, and how does it work?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We're going to go to Dr. Bey for a minute here, and we want some more background information on you, sir. And because we have three of you today, which is fascinating. Is this first time we've had 3?
3.
Yeah, this is cool. And it is so nice to meet all of you. We will be getting, contact information as we go further so that the listening audience can jot down. I always tell them, get a paper and pencil and jot down information so that if something triggers, a memory or a thought like, oh, I need to call these people, they're prepared to do that. So you heard me, people. Get your paper and pencil, and we will have their contact information. In the meantime, Dr. Bay, please take it from there.
So I'm a lifelong Pittsburgh resident as well. I grew up in the Beltsuver neighborhood in the city of Pittsburgh, graduated from Peabody High School, and went off to Penn State. When I came back to Pittsburgh, I came back with a secondary education degree. My first teaching job was in Clareton High School. I was in Clareton for the first couple of years, and then went to McKeesport and taught in McKeesport from 96 to 2004. And in that time that I was teaching, I loved what I was doing. I loved the energy the kids brought to the classroom. But the more that I started to see, some of the challenges that we had in the region, and, we started a couple of programs, Model United Nations and ski clubs, and we'd get together with other schools. And we saw the disparities that, the kids in McKeesport and Clareton had compared to some of the other kids that we were working with and collaborating with. And for me, every year it was tougher and tougher. The region was changing, and resources were not coming into the schools at the rate that they were. And I thought that, we needed to do some system change work. And so that got my passion going for thinking about, making a difference for students and sort of removing some of these barriers, because it didn't matter the kids that I had when I was a teaching assistant at Penn State, the kids that I had at Clareton and McKeesport, they were just as bright and eager, but they didn't have the same resources to prepare them.
Sure. It's sad when you look, especially at McKeesport, where it was to what it became, and it's heartbreaking because I remember as a child, going down with my mom or grandmother or something, and what a beautiful city, and what wonderful things were going on down there. So bless your heart that was something that well, of course, a lot of people recognize it, but it's doing something about it. So I understand that last year the Pittsburgh Study won top national honors for community engaged research among the universities. Whoever wants to take this question, tell us about that.
Let me back up a little bit before to tell you
Sure.
more about the Pittsburgh Study, because
Okay.
I said I talked about me and how I got involved. But so what I did, I went back to grad school, came back to Pittsburgh, and when I got back, I was looking for ways to get community involved, and thinking about how we can taking the kids, the energy and the passion that they had, and thinking about when I was a kid, what I liked to do. I liked to play in the park. And all of the kids, kids when they're young, they like soil. They like trees.
They like to get dirt.
They like trees. They like playing in the creeks. These are things, but they don't see all the time that there's a path. These are potential careers. And what I also saw was that so many of the parks that we played in were disinvested. The economy changed, and the resources weren't there to invest in the parks. And so I thought, here's a good way to think about getting kids connected. Let's get the kids into the park. Let's use this as some advocacy of organizing community around an issue that was passionate to everybody, a place for kids to play. And so through that, I started to get more experience working with some community partners, the Student Conservation Association, Remake Learning. And in doing that, the experience that I gained brought me into contact with other folks. And that's how, I met Dr. Omer, and was learning about how she was doing some community organizing to build community capacity to tackle issues in Georgia. And I wanted to learn more about that. And so we started, hey, how can we work together? How can we work together? And so, back to the origin story of the Pittsburgh Study. So around this time, my network was growing, and we started the Urban Kind Institute, and we started to have these conversations around the community where we were inviting folks to come in from philanthropy, former school teachers from about 6 or 7 districts participated, people who ran after school programs, sports programs. And the question that we asked was this: what would we do differently as a region if our goal was that every kid that grew up here was ready to take care of himself and their family as they defined that by the time they were 25? How would we invest in our infrastructure differently? How would we think about nutrition education? How would we think about financial literacy? Just what would we do differently if our goal was a commitment to the kids that grow up here? And we had just had about 7 or 8 conversations just around the community, and folks loved it. We got some tremendous input, and it was right around this same time that I was unaware that Children's Hospital was also asking a similar question about how they can be a better partner between Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, the University of Pittsburgh, and some of the partners there. How can they be better involved as a part of removing some of the barriers to childhood thriving?
Wow.
And
that's
so,
awesome.
And so that's when we came together and said, hey, from there it was let's partner, let's work, and we've been committed ever since.
Wow.
You know, it's interesting. I had a company called Professional Aquatic Consultants International. We did a consultant job for the city of Pittsburgh with their swimming aquatic facilities. And one thing they determined aquatic facilities were the swimming pools were a safety issue. The safety issues was keeping the children off the street and busy at their swimming pools. And they had to open them. And, of course, my background is obviously basically all the things you did as a public educator. My eyes were broadened when I became a guidance counselor. I was normally having fun with kids. Now I had to deal with the families too, and I started to see a broader issue as opposed to just the children. And I think that's what you guys are doing and bringing and starting the conversation.
How true. How true. Once you do broaden out horizon and look into the family dynamics, it can change everything. And God bless you for doing this work. Okay, only because we want you 3 to really talk about what you want the audience to hear and what you want them to know. We're going to give you the floor more instead of us, doing all these, asking questions that we may not really know what direction to go in. I want you to sort of, piggyback off of each other and give us the picture of what you want the audience to know and what the main focus is.
Sure.
Okay?
That question that you started to ask about the award that we received. Do you want to talk a little bit about that,
go.
Mary? And then we
That
can
works.
connect that to the work.
Okay.
I think we have to think about what the University of Pittsburgh has done over the last decade, really, since I came back from Georgia, to actually think about how do we effectively and respectfully engage the community in the work we're doing? How do we become genuine and authentic partners? And so they've started the Pittsburgh Study as well as this effort called Community Engagement Centers that in this community engagement movement, and they have an Office of Community Engagement, Community Affairs. And so we have physical locations where we're working with communities in the Hill District, Hazelwood, Homewood, but we also have this approach to working with communities called community engaged research, right? And to me, I was a community organizer, I would never have thought of doing research any other way, because I started working in the Mon Valley when I was getting my MSW here in Pittsburgh in the mid to late 80s with my colleague organizing and working there to help people address the changes from the steel industry. Absolutely. And how that was affecting their kids and their families and their communities. And he worked with the Allegheny Conference. Mike Eichler worked with the Allegheny Conference to form the Mon Valley Initiative, and I did that work all over the country. And when I got my PhD, I'm like, why are people not working with communities?
That's correct.
It was ridiculous. So I just didn't understand it. And I was kind of an anomaly then. But now when I went to Georgia, whole master's was all about community partnerships. And then when I came back, they were starting this movement with the Pittsburgh Study, with these community engagement centers. So that award honored the work of, honestly, the university and Dr. Liz Miller and the Pittsburgh Study and the work they're doing. It's a recognition. I'm involved nationally in a lot of efforts with social work to further community engaged research. And there's more emphasis on that and people wanting to do that, and honestly kind of struggling with how to do it. And so there's a lot of efforts in national organizations that do community psychology, community-based social work, community research. I'm the vice president of an organization called the Society for Social Work and Research, and the theme that I developed for our conference next year is strengthening social impact through collaborative research. We're going to have an award in our organization to honor those partnerships now. So it's really critical. It's really doing research collaboratively, genuinely, sharing decision making, sharing roles, actually engaging the community in so many ways. Miss Teresa was a community facilitator and also a member of the community advisory board in the West Side project we did.
So let me set up Ms. Jenks to bring
That's where we're going next.
to bring our citizen science into
Sure.
how this works. So one of the principles that we have at the Pittsburgh Study, and this is what we were recognized for in that award from the Kellogg, was it the Kellogg Foundation?
Yes, I believe so.
And it was research with communities,
Right.
not research on communities.
Very good.
Oh,
And
yes.
it was research with, and what that meant, there are issues in the neighborhoods that residents see that researchers don't always see. How do we get those research questions out of the citizen scientists and the people who are working every day in the neighborhoods? Ms. Jenks, you want to tell us about, what that looked like when you joined the Pittsburgh Study?
I joined the Pittsburgh Study so long ago, but I joined the Pittsburgh Study as a facilitator of violence prevention classes for young men. And then I did young women. And then after that, we did some research on thriving. And that word thriving, what does that mean?
It can mean a lot of things.
It can mean a lot of things.
Yes.
And it depends on who you're asking. What does thriving mean? Somebody else's thriving could mean they got up and went to work today. Another person's thriving is that they collected all these materialistic things. So Dr. Miller and her research and partnering with her and being a community scientist meant for me that I would go out in the community and I would represent the Pittsburgh Study. And they know me. I've already been involved. I was a Girl Scout leader. I was a teacher's aide for a million years. I did basketball. I didn't play basketball, but I got the permit for the gym to be open so there was a safe place for the kids to come in the community. So me, personally, my connection with the community led to them feeling more comfortable with research. Yes. They look at you and they say, "Oh, that's Miss Teresa." Aww. So
yes.
we're gonna try and see what she's talking about. What is she talking about? This thriving? We don't know what that means. So we asked the questions and they answered.
Yes.
They learned to trust you.
Yes.
This whole study looks like it's not about the what, it's about the why.
Yes.
Sure.
And the who.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
the why, the who, the engagement. So, but the project that Miss Teresa and I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about it. That's under the Pittsburgh Studies Policy and Place Committee. It's called ReCAST. It's revital. You know what? I never
The acronym.
remember.
It's
an
right
acronym.
here.
What does it say? I went blank.
That's okay, but we will
But
tell
it's called
you.
ReCAST, and it's through we partner with the Allegheny County Department of Human Services, and we applied to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration for this. There's more and more, thank God, federal grants allowing these community partnered research projects. There wasn't 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
There is now, thank God. And even the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is now funding this kind of work in our study. And so I started doing this work in Georgia because I heard this sociologist called Robert Sampson describe something called collective efficacy, and I'm like, what the heck is that?
Okay.
And so I'm like, he's like, well, it's strong relationships in neighborhoods where they share norms and they also look out for one another and they're willing to work together to solve problems. So I'm like, well, that's what an organizer does with communities. That's what we do.
Right.
So is there any interventions or programs to actually help communities who want to facilitate more of that? oh, no, I don't do that. I'm a sociologist. So I was like, what the heck? We have to do something. And so it was like I engaged with community and other colleagues in social work as well in criminal justice, and we started a training program. And then we partnered with a community-based organization to actually have them involved in organizing and mobilizing the community, doing the training, and then they did a project afterwards in Atlanta, Georgia. And that same project is what we're doing in Pittsburgh. I started with Perry Hilltop and Fineview Citizens Council, and then we got this funding, and we worked in Westside with Miss Teresa and all of the partners there. And it's intergenerational. It's youth and adults coming together, finally talking about their own perspectives on safety and supportive resources for young people. And there's a lot of research that shows if collective efficacy is strong, there's more supports for young people, there's less violence, there's less crime, there's improved mental health, there's improved well-being. And I was like, that's pretty powerful. I didn't know that when I was an organizer. That was the right thing to do. But knowing that, it was really important to then engage the community in this project in structuring and tailoring the training program for young people and also adults, and then working with them. How do you want to apply what you learned in the training through the project? So I don't know if you want to talk about your experience in the training and also the project that you guys did, because they did an amazing job. So, Ms. Teresa.
So let's start with the training. So the training was a 7-week training. All the facilitators were community members, and we were under West End Power, which is a nonprofit organization in our community. And so they covered us as far as gathering the people together. And so we were under West End Power for that. There was a 7-week training for the facilitators. We learned to facilitate these meetings. And then there was a 7-week training for the families. So the families came in and they went to a 7-week training as well. And in each training session, they learned more about what was important to them and their community. They had to get up and voice their opinions and give us their ideas. And so in the end, after these 7 weeks of this and 7 weeks of more training, the youth-led group, it was adults, families, and the youth. And we really wanted the youth to tell us what their needs were in our community. Please tell us what you see now, what you may see later. We even did some experiment with the What You Do commercials on, and what would you do if you saw what would you do if you saw a young person trying to break into a car? And so given that idea of, would you stand up to them? Would you walk away because it looks dangerous? Would you speak up? Those type of things are what just an idea of the issues that we tackled in the meeting. And so the end result for us was we did the children-led projects. They wanted a block party of all the different entities in the community. So I live on the west side, but there are like 12 or more different communities, little pockets.
Yes.
That are all have their own community meetings, and nobody gets them all together. There's no there's no one centrally located place for everybody to come together. So the kids wanted a block party, and we did another project called the Kindness Project. In the Kindness Project, we took the kindness signs, and the kids made them themselves. Kind of like the ones that you get when it's voting season. I'm sure we all know what those look like.
Boy, do I.
Oh, boy, do we know what those look like. It's kind of like those. And some were homemade, and some we had printed up with already kindness words on them. Mine's still in front of my house. It says, be kind. Others said different things. I mean, the kids made them themselves, and they took them home, and they put them in front of their homes. And so that spreads kindness when you see that. If you're just walking by, you're out walking your dog, or you're out driving by and you see a kindness sign, that could change the temperature.
It could change your day.
Yeah. It could change your temperature within your day or within somebody in your community's day.
That's awesome.
And the block party was awesome. The kids had a great time. Everything was free. We got a grant from the University of Pittsburgh, and they were able to help us pay for those things. The church that we combined with, we work with in the community, White Lily Baptist Church, those men cooked all the food, and we had games everywhere. We had all the different communities that are in that neighborhood that never really get together came together on this day.
That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. I got goosebumps. I think that is the next time you have one, you invite me because I want to come.
It was amazing. And so, so that's the embodiment of collective efficacy. It's the social ties,
That's
the
awesome.
connections, the young people feeling valued. They really wanted to focus on kindness because one of the young people, I'll never forget this, people always say negative stuff about us, young people.
Yeah.
They don't value who we are. They don't see, we think kindness is important to us and to other people. And so let's promote that, and so I think that this is really we provide compensation for the partnerships, for the community-based organization. We pay our facilitators, we pay people for attending the training, we compensate them for completing surveys. We have co-production of the project with Urban Kind Institute and Neighborhood Resiliency Project, and each partner in each neighborhood. And so this is turning research on its head, and I still think we have a lot of work to do to continue that.
Well,
There's
you're
still
dealing with
challenges and
people, so
struggles.
there's always going to be a lot of work to
It's
do.
the university has a lot of barriers, honestly. There's university structures, and the institutional review boards serve a really important purpose, but sometimes they don't
They
understand
need to get a grip.
the kind of work we do. Sometimes the institutions that process payments inside the university mess things up. I mean, this is not just in University of Pittsburgh. This is all my colleagues who do this work across the country that we've been sharing. How do we address these institutional and other barriers, right? How do we really
Get them
do
out
this
of the way?
authentically? And I mean, they're trying. Pitt's trying. It's not like we're not trying, but it's hard. It's not easy.
You know what the interesting thing about Pitt, and as we spoke before the radio show, the review board, but one of the problems that I saw at Pitt when I was there was that everything changes all the time.
It does.
You have new students doing new roles. You have different people doing roles. And what worked last year may not work this year. So that's one of the barriers you're up against.
Yes.
But this is fantastic. And I have to go back to one more thing. I'll just take a few more seconds. When I grew up in YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs. Those don't Girl Scouts, they don't exist that much anymore.
No.
The Ys, I'm devastated. I did a lot of work for YUSA, and we just don't have them. And if you see that very simply, the commercials you saw last week on television, they need lifeguards. And I trained thousands of lifeguards, but we don't have the facilities to do them anymore. Nobody wants to do that. So let's talk about ReCAST. Again, explain what those are the building blocks of your program?
Yeah, so the project that I'm doing, and there's two others. So I got to know so many people through the Pittsburgh Study in the community, but also inside of Pitt that I didn't know. And also through these community engagement centers, this movement we've come together at Pitt to further. And one was Dr. Miller. And so I'm like, oh, you're a medical doctor? Oh my gosh. I just thought that was really cool that somebody that was I've never seen a medical doctor do community engaged research before. And I was like, well, you kind of think like me, and you think how can we work together? And so the first project I got involved with was the Child Thriving Matrix Study. And then I'm like, we should really, you're doing some great work. So is so she was doing so much work. All the youth violence work with the teens that Miss Teresa was involved in was Dr. Miller. And then another scientist, Dr. Allison Suba, was doing work to go into hospitals when kids were victims of violence and to provide mentoring and supportive services to those kids and those families. And I'm like, I saw this ReCAST thing. We should apply.
Wow.
So let's apply and do the three-tiered, all these three programs together. And we have a steering committee made up of members of the community that we're working in, that Ms. Teresa is also on that steering committee, partnering Urban Kind. Dr. Jason Beery's my principal investigator on the ReCAST steering committee. We facilitate that together with Tracy Joyner from Neighborhood Resilience Project. And that guides us, and they are involved in the science, that steering committee, in informing what we're doing and supporting and connecting and facilitating. So it's
Wow.
really, really cool.
You know what
I
we're
don't know
going
if
to
you wanna-
do? We're going to let Dr.
As a
Bay say
partner.
a couple things, but while it's in my head, number one, we're going to rebook you. And the next show, because you're doing the foundation right now and touching on a lot of things, I want you guys to, like you were talking about, you know, the things you were doing with the kids and the block party and everything. That's what I want next time.
Yes.
Is some real not information, but just what you guys are really delving into. And I want to know more about the block party. I think that's
Right.
fascinating. That is so important for children.
So let me just say really quickly, we're working in 10 neighborhoods over the 5 years. We worked
Wow.
in Braddock, Rankin, and North Braddock. We're in Homewood now. We're working in Wilkinsburg, Ness, and we're going to be working through the next several years. So you're going to have a lot of stories about how they applied this work.
And, you know, the interesting thing
you
is
can
we're
talk about. So
we're North ourselves, but we want to promote what you're doing.
Yes.
So that's why we will rebook you. And anytime you want us to say anything on the air,
Yeah.
you have my email number.
Yeah.
all right, cool.
I'm going to say one thing. My sister owns Priority One EMS. You may have seen our trucks in Braddock, Rankin,
Yeah.
East Pittsburgh, and North Braddock. We are 911 in those areas. So we have a connection right there.
Wow.
Yeah. See what a small world it is and the synchronicities of things. Okay, I digress.
So
Go ahead, Dr. Bay.
One cool thing about this is one lens inside of the Pittsburgh Study, what they're doing here. As I said before, there are more than 100 researchers. All of the projects are under this umbrella. So, you know, their work, talking about the work in the communities that they're in, but we're also working out of East Allegheny School District. We're working out of the school districts, you know, the other school districts, South Allegheny. We have projects ongoing, and, you know, we're present there in other forms. And so the cool thing, like I said, we're looking at this lens today, but like we could be here weekly with other researchers who are just as engaged.
Keep this whole
And
thing going.
what I'm saying is there are so many projects.
Series.
So, I mean, it's if you go to the pittsburghstudy.org, it's hard to talk about the Pittsburgh Study without a visual because it is so unique and what it is. But there are cross-cutting committees, like, you know, this is a project of the policy in place, looking at how does policy about place matter to child thriving. There are other committees that are looking at environmental issues, the other issue, and so that, you know, so that's one lens that every committee has that lens on it. But then there are also age cohort committees. So what's happening with pre-birth to newborn? What's happening newborn to 3-year-olds? You know, then preschool to, you know, so it's up through, you know, young 20, you know, the early 20s. And so when you look at how, I'm not going to call it complicated, how comprehensive it is.
Yes.
That's when you have a chance to say, oh, wow, look at this. What are these team of researchers doing? Everything to what value do trees and healthy community forests play in promoting positive outcomes?
Yes.
And that's a project that we're doing here in McKeesport with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and Tube City Renaissance. You know, making sure that schools and kids are thinking about just the value and importance of a healthy urban forest and all of the benefits of that to kids. And so it's easy to get caught into, oh, wow, this is the Pittsburgh Study. But it's so much more than that, and it's so important that we think about how we intersect these things with the single goal of removing barriers so that this is a good place for kids to grow up so that
Yes.
they can thrive.
You can't imagine what I'm working on now. I won't go into that. But at East Allegheny, and I also exist in the political world, one thing I talked to my political colleagues was, you talk about the kids and having problems with kids. You can't just look at the children. You've got to look at the whole family.
Yes.
And the community.
And
Yeah, and that's social work. Honestly, social work 101. We use a systems perspective. I mean, and that's the scientific talk. But yeah, it's our students learn how to work at all those levels and how do they intersect and how do we intervene at those levels and support community and
That's
families and
fascinating.
individuals. So.
I would
I
like
I
you-
think Jamil's right. There is so much cool stuff going on with the Pittsburgh Study. So many projects. Several of my colleagues at social work are involved in some amazing things, and I just think it would be great to highlight all those things.
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, absolutely.
It just would.
No,
So-
people need to know that because there's so many stigmas with so much, you know, in big cities and things like that. And I find it very disheartening when people have a preconceived notion of something, and they don't know all the good that's being done out there, with what you guys are doing and your group and everything. So yeah, we're gonna continue this, absolutely. But before we go any further, please give us your most important contact information, the best way to get a hold of either, whether it's all three of you, one of you, however you connect. Whatever the best way to get a hold of you. Get your pencils and paper ready, people.
Well, the easiest way to learn more about the Pittsburgh Study is at thepittsburghstudy.org.
Oh.
That's
Simple.
an easy way.
There
You can
you
sign
go.
up. You can sign up, sign your kids up, sign your families, find out where programs are near you, and just get a sense of the type of research that's happening, and get on the newsletter to find out more. thepittsburghstudy.org. It's an easy way to find us.
Okay. Would that pertain to all three of you?
Well, we can give individuals.
Yeah, however you want to do it, it's fine. I'm just asking so that, if there's, like with the block party, somebody may be going,
That's really what you're looking for, an invite to the block.
I want to have fun. I'll even DJ
we'll be
it
having
for
more in all
you.
these communities, fun things. They did one in Perry Hilltop too, when they renovated a basketball court that the young people wanted.
Aw, see, this is so
They did a
cool.
cops and hoops thing. It was like so cool. But I'm at the School of Social Work, so if you just even go to our website, you can find me. But my email is mlo51@pitt.edu. And you can find my profile there, other contact information about on the Pitt webs, on the University of Pittsburgh Community Engagement Centers. You could go to Google that on the website. You can learn about the Community Engagement Center.
Give your
movements as
contact
well.
one more time, just a little slower.
Yes, mlo51@pitt.edu.
Thank you.
And Miss Teresa, she's really important to listen.
Yes.
All three of you are.
I was gonna say I'm not more important than everybody. We're a team. We are a team.
There you
we
go.
work really
That's
hard
awesome.
together.
It's awesome.
It doesn't matter what you're here to talk about, but we're a team.
Yes.
Jamel knows all the research and all the great numbers and things to tell you, and Mary knows all of the things about social work and collective efficacy. And that word, collective efficacy, you're like, what is that? So when she explains it to you, it's just us.
Yeah, there you go.
Teaming up in
There
the
you
community,
go.
getting together to do what we think is great for the community, but we want to know what the community thinks. So my contact information is, you can contact me through the pittsburghstudy.org.
Okay.
Or I will give you my email. It's tjenks1804@yahoo.com. Somebody said Yahoo. Yes, I'm still on Yahoo.
And there is nothing wrong with that. I'll tell you what, I am so thrilled we had you here today because what I'd like to ask you, we still have some time. Can you give some, without, anything very, very in depth, but some success stories, like with what you're doing, like you were talking about the block party. Is there some things like a reduction in crime or a reduction in whatever? You know what I'm saying? Something that people can relate to.
I'm not sure for me if there's an actual reduction in crime, or I'm not sure those exact numbers or what that looks like, but it's a gathering of the people. There's a representative from every part of our community that comes together, and right
But
now,
see, that would precipitate that.
Yes.
Because people start to get to know each other and care for each other and go, oh, you're not so bad. You're not. Well, I don't know about this one here, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That is so vital.
and we want to continue working together. So we have been going to the little pockets of community meetings as a group, and just going there and seeing what can we do as volunteers to help. So there was a meeting in the Sheridan community. There's a meeting in the Elliott community. There's a meeting in the Chartiers community.
A little busy, huh?
There are lots of little meetings, but nobody's coming together.
See, they all, yeah.
And we want to be the glue that brings them together.
That's
they can still
awesome.
have their meetings, But let's have
be a little more inclusive with it. Yes.
And include everybody in the meetings. Everybody in the meetings.
So we are measuring this. So we do a survey of the participants and pre-training, post-training, and post-project. And some of the data so far, especially from the work I did in Atlanta, does show that what we're doing does help to build collective efficacy, stronger social ties, increase norms and values around prevention, and those kinds of supports. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention grant that we got will help us look at the reduction in crime and violence by comparing what we're doing in the 10 intervention neighborhoods with comparison communities who are getting health education sessions. So we'll be able to look at comparisons with the participants, those participant level outcomes like in terms of their relationships, their engagement in the community, all of those things, whether they're willing to intervene or not in certain specific situations, what they're willing to do to advocate neighborhood activism. We look at also that. And then we're also gathering data, crime and violence and some statistics to look at comparisons. And we'll have a large, 10 intervention and 10 comparison communities. And they are doing research in all the other Pittsburgh Study. There is a research component. We work with the communities on that. The steering committee particularly is very involved in how we structured that CDC grant and how we selected those communities. So I don't know if you want to say something else, but there is that research component. And here's the big thing, that we do a community survey as well in the beginning, and we share that data in the training, and we're sharing that data with the community. Here's how your fellow neighborhoods think about collective efficacy, what they've been exposed to in terms of violence and crime, how they think about norms and values for prevention, all of those things. So that data is shared right in the training and also is going to be shared widely in the community.
With everybody.
One of the things that I found as a guidance counselor at East Allegheny that I think needs really to be looked at, and hopefully you're looking at it, is the transient nature of our society today. Yes. So many kids are coming and moving all the time. And we miss those kids a lot of times in our efforts.
Yes, definitely.
Sure.
Right.
That's a good point.
There are some schools where the transience is greater than 30%. So 30% of the kids that start that school year will be replaced by another 30% next year.
Wow.
Or by the end of the year. So that's an issue. But one thing, I work with a researcher who's also a pediatrician, community engaged, Dr. Kristen Ray, and she and I have been doing this idea of bright spotting. And the idea is that, predictors are not determinants. And so we can predict you have a community with these type of demographics, these type of socioeconomic conditions, these outcomes. But sometimes you see a community that bucks the trend. Mm-hmm. What can we learn there? And so we've looked at a couple of different ways of, digging into some problem solving. Looked at one, childhood asthma flare-ups where kids are missing school for childhood asthma. You can predict that based on some demographics, but that doesn't necessarily, some communities, that's not true. What can we learn from those communities, and how do we lift that work up and share it with other communities? Another is infant mortality and better outcomes for better maternal outcomes. Looking at, what works, what doesn't work, how can we share that? And sometimes there's just really small interventions. Like, hey, there's a church group that reaches out to teen mothers, pregnant teens, and sort of provides some support around them.
Wow. Yeah, and there's the answer to that, even if it's a small answer or a short answer that can be expanded upon.
Right.
I know we're winding down. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, obviously this is a rebook, maybe more than once, and I'll give you some schedules. I'm going to need everybody's email because I'll communicate with y'all. And this is so important to our communities. It's amazing. As a former guidance counselor, I understand that. And I'm glad you're working with East Allegheny. Certainly, we are a community. And we talk about Pittsburgh all the time, but we're really talking about Allegheny County.
Right.
And probably surrounding counties, too.
Yes.
So, it's a major study. When I looked at the studies and the things that you've done last night, as I mentioned before the show, wow, this is a lot of paperwork.
Tons of paperwork.
We don't like that part, but
I've gone through the IRB system, so and working with children. Wow. But you guys are doing a great job. I'm so glad we had you on.
Yeah.
And we're going to do this again. Awesome. We can be your voice if you'd like that. Yeah. You don't necessarily need visual cues. By the way, visual cues. You think this is tough? I had a magician on the program. Try that.
Oh my gosh. What?
So this was easy.
You guys, honestly, you've been great. Thank you so much. Real quick, give the best way to get a hold of you, and we will have you back. And we are just so grateful for what you're doing. And especially since COVID. Oh, my God. I'll bet you things, were so much more difficult. So we'll keep you in our prayers and give us another contact information, and we're going to have to say goodbye.
Thank you.
All right. I can be reached. You can find me at the Urban Kind Institute website. Urban Kind. It's one word. It's a play on the idea of a humankind. But we think, cities should be kind places for people.
Yes. All communities should be.
Right. And that's the Urban Kind. But you can reach me there, my web email address and contact me link there.
Okay.
I guess we're going to say goodbye now.
All right. The end of the show. Thank you for joining us on today's edition of The Inner Page. Join us again next Wednesday at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on 92.3, 94.1, and 102.1 FM, also on 620 KHB. This is Alan Wagner and Susan Blake, your host of The Inner Page, a public service program. Thank you again for listening. Take care, drive safe, and have a great day.